Parashat Emor, by Rav Gabriel, but it was spoken before by God, who said to Moshe, he said, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, and Adonai said to Moshe, Emor. Here it's right here, Emor, the imperative of the verb to say. El Kohanim bnei Haaron, to the priest, sons of Aaron. When we read the text, very often we read a verse and say, "Oh, this is nice, and it means this and this and that," but we very often forget to go to who's talking to whom and why. Because maybe it's not saying it to you. A lot of stuff that people say, God said this. Yeah, he said it to Moses to tell Aaron, to tell the priest. And if you're not a son of Aaron, it really not concerns you. A lot of the commandments are concerned, especially those in Leviticus. This is why it's called Leviticus, because it has a lot to do with what was told the sons of Aaron as Levites. So, and of course, as usual, as we have done this year, I want to go, instead of getting Parashat Emor, by Rav Gabriel, but it was spoken before by God, who said to Moshe, he said, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, and Adonai said to Moshe, Emor. Here it's right here, Emor, the imperative of the verb to say. El Kohanim bnei Haaron, to the priest, sons of Aaron. When we read the text, very often we read a verse and say, "Oh, this is nice, and it means this and this and that," but we very often forget to go to who's talking to whom and why. Because maybe it's not saying it to you. A lot of stuff that people say, God said this. Yeah, he said it to Moses to tell Aaron, to tell the priest. And if you're not a son of Aaron, it really not concerns you. A lot of the commandments are concerned, especially those in Leviticus. This is why it's called Leviticus, because it has a lot to do with what was told the sons of Aaron as Levites. So, and of course, as usual, as we have done this year, I want to go, instead of getting into all the little rituals and everything, I want to get into the ethical, the lifestyle of Torah. I hope I don't bug you with it. Even the 2 weeks we didn't have service, I prepared the service. I have it for next year. I have it, But here we have, so according to the Complete Jewish Bible, it says, Adonai said to Moshe, speak to the Kohanim, the word Kohen is priest, the sons of Aaron, not just all the Kohanim, the sons of, those who are the sons of Aaron, and they're being put aside, they're being put kodesh, separate, set apart. They're being set apart. They have different laws. Like it says, people love that verse. There is one law, one Torah for all, yes. And this Torah makes distinctions between people. Between priest, high priest, soldier, child, man, woman, stranger. It's one law which makes distinction. The principle of distinction is really a hard pill to swallow in Western modern society. We don't like people to feel to distinguish between people and people. We don't like it, but it's only on a religious level that we don't like it. But in every other level we have it, and I'll talk about it in a minute. And so it says, I want to a little bit go on to, it says, no Kohen, no priest, is to make himself unclean for any of his people who dies. Okay, we I don't know if you heard it, but the idea of unclean here, it's not like hygienic. It's about ritual. It's not even about sin. We talked about it one time. It's about ceremonial uncleanliness, which makes it you can't go to the temple, or you can't. You have to have a mikveh, go into the waters before you go to the stuff like that. They didn't even have a temple. All they had was the ark. So they were learning the protocol of approaching God, even, and like, and what makes you unclean is a contact with something that's dying, corrupt, spoiled, rotten, is unclean. So when you go attend the funeral and you handle the body of somebody of your family who died, you make yourself unclean. A Kohen couldn't do that. You know, a Kohen couldn't do that. And you got to realize, this has to do like not long ago we talked about Passover and Yeshua who was on the cross. They were starting Shabbat. They were starting the 15th of Nisan. It was a Shabbat. On top of it, it was Shabbat Gadol, because not only it was the 15th of Nisan, the first day of Chag HaMatzot, but it was a Shabbat Saturday too. It was a weekly Shabbat too. It was great Shabbat, a high Shabbat it's called. And here we have two rabbis who are going to take care of Yeshua's body. They're going to handle his body. The woman took care of some things, you know, but it's like those two rabbis, and maybe the woman too, we don't know the exact details. We know they took care a little bit, but they didn't finish the embalmment. But we know that Joseph of Arimathea, and also in history book Nicodemus, they also put him in that tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. But they could not then bring their lamb to the temple. If because they handled Yeshua's body, they were in a state of ritual and cleanliness. So it is a messianic tradition. It's been understood that actually Joseph and Nicodemus celebrated Shabbat on this week, which is called celebrate Pesach on Pesach Sheni. You know, the second Pesach, because it's an option that if you were not able to do it on the 14th of Nisan, you can do it the 14th of Iyar.
Were they Levites then, Joseph?
No, but they were not Levites. They were Pharisees, rabbis, but they were in Jerusalem, and they would have to go to the temple with the lamb to get it sanctified. But they took care of another lamb instead. You know what I mean? So they did Pesach Sheni. Yeah, yeah. So here, and it says, so in Hebrew it says, and they shall not make themselves unclean. The word here, for those of you who took Hebrew, it says lo, which is a negative particle, no, yetameh. Yetameh. You will not make yourself unclean, ceremonially unclean. They were not Levites, those two. You know, but because of it, they couldn't do the Pesach on that day. They took care of another lamb. You know, so it's quite interesting. So, the previous parasha was addressed to all the children of Israel. In Leviticus 19:2, it says, "Speak to the entire community of Israel." This parasha is addressed to the priest. We're always going to realize who's talking to whom. The descendant of the sons of Aaron. And then it says 21:2, except for his close relatives, his mother, father, son, daughter, and brother, he may also make himself unclean for his virgin sister who has never been married and is therefore dependent on him. So basically, he was able, a priest, not a high priest, a priest could not be able to attend the funeral of somebody from the people, but he could do for his direct family members. The high priest, he couldn't even do for his family. You see? So we see what I'm trying to show here, different laws for different people. We need to be comfortable with it. We need to be comfortable with it. different laws, different levels of purity for different people. The high priest could not even make himself ceremonially unclean for his family. Even the choice of marrying, yeah, it's all written. I just need to go to my paper. Yes?
I read a book called Song of Redemption. It's about King Hezekiah restoring everything. And in the story, his wife miscarries. And he isn't allowed to comfort her, to hold her and comfort her, because he had to go preside over the temple. So that was true. But she thought she had sinned. That's why in the book, the story.
Well, we need to look at the story. You can look at the story. I'm sorry, I missed a bit what you said because of the dog.
It's just that the king couldn't touch his wife.
King Hezekiah.
Because his wife had miscarried in this story I read.
Oh, it's in the story.
It's a fictional take on him restoring the kingdom.
Well.
And he had to go preside in the temple, so he couldn't touch his wife who had miscarried.
Well, if he was king, Hezekiah, if I'm not mistaken, was king of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So he was from the tribe of Judah. And this is addressed to the Levites, sons of Aaron who are Levites. So if it's a fictional story, unless there is more to the story, I don't know the whole story, but this thing only concerns the Levites. But if he was king of Judah, he was a king of Jerusalem, king of Judah, maybe he had to go to the temple that day for something. It has to do with going into the temple. It has to do with, going into the temple. So apart from that, this is only to the sons of Levi who are from the descendants of Aaron. So maybe there is more to the story. You can see the full story. Yeah.
Interesting. I was curious about it.
No, but it's good because when we read something like this, we've got to say, well, he is from the tribe of Judah, so maybe there was something about him going to the temple.
Well, he was. He was supposed to go to the temple to preside over something.
Yeah, so maybe that's probably why then. It's quite. It's like Aaron. He could not, and when his sons died, he was in the middle of a service. Okay, so and then it says Leviticus 21:4. He may not make himself unclean because he is a leader among his people. That's the reason we are given. There is not really searching very far. It's written because he is a leader among his people. So the sons of Aaron who were priests were considered leader. What is the word used for? He's a chief. He's a chief among his people, a leader, a nasi, or something like that. So this teaches us the principle of distinction. Though there is one Torah, the Torah carries different application, distinguishing between different people in the community of Israel. There are Torah that are solely particular to the king, to the high priest, while others to particular groups such as priests, soldiers, and resident alien. And again, it's something that's not easily accepted in the modern world. The distinction between people is not easily accepted as far as religion is concerned. But whereas society today claims homogeneity, its own laws, the laws of society contradict that claim. For example, the IRS. Not everybody pays the same taxes across the board. There is distinction. It's actually creating a bigger uproar sometimes. There is distinction who pays what. There is laws for businesses, laws for individuals, if you're married, if you're not married, blah, blah, blah,
Laws for senators?
So, even healthcare, all the government people have. There's a government healthcare company. We're not going to go there. So there is distinction. Also, if I get in trouble, if somebody gets in trouble, a guy who has money can afford himself a much more efficient lawyer. So that doesn't make same justice for everybody. The guy who can afford himself, the very rich, smart aleck lawyer who has resources and time and blah blah blah, he's going to get off with murder. He's going to get away with murder. Where the poor little guy, you know, who's got nothing, is going to get the state lawyer who is going to try to tell him to make a deal under the table and be okay, you know, and plead guilty.
And then they also can, because there's a distinction between the judges too. Oh yeah, this one is this way and this one's that way, and I can see if I can try and get us into that guy.
Yeah, there are distinction. And then how we address people. A judge will address your honor. You don't say, hey, Bill. You know, even the president will say, Mr. President. Is to say, we address people differently. There is distinction in society. We live like it. You know, somebody might call me Mr. Lombroso. My son calls me Papa. We have distinctions. We treat people differently. Distinctions are part of life. So to say we're all the same doesn't work. If the government can pay its debt, it can consider printing money. If I do, I go to jail. You know, it's like there is all I'm trying to say we're all the same is not true. Society requires us to make distinction between people. And this is the same thing as that. There is distinction. What we're reading here is the same type of thing, distinction. A soldier will go and do his duty and kill someone, of course, while obeying certain rules of engagement decided by the military. But if I do, I'm a murderer. Same action, but really different. One is sent off, one is just taking the law in his own hand. A policeman can arrest someone for breaking the law. I may be very aware of the law, but I cannot arrest somebody and detain them in a jail in my house for breaking the law. I'm not a policeman. You know, so, and I like when, for example, I remember talking with somebody one time about even the Hebrew calendar. And that person actually is a Messianic teacher who follows the Hillel calendar, the Jewish calendar. And then when he told me about it, he says, you know, it's whether I agree or not doesn't matter. It's not my job. It was given to the Levites to define the calendar. And the last Levite who worked on it was Hillel too. So until we get another Levite anointed by the temple to work on it, well, it's going to have to suffice. Anybody who messes with the calendar, it's not their job. The calendar was given a charge in Leviticus to the Levites, the sons of Aaron. So everybody has their job, and that brings unity when we do that, because it's not everybody decides whatever they want whenever. Then we have anarchy, and when you have anarchy, you don't have order, you don't have security, you can't work together because we're not walking in step. And then the Torah lifestyle is a community lifestyle. It's not like everybody doing their own thing. Without community, we can't live Torah. And that's something I was bringing about last week. Somebody can say, I'm going to go live like an hermit, because what was that?
A hermit.
A hermit, in order but that was a French hermit.
An ill meat.
You know, in order to be very religious, you know, I'm going to meditate and everything. But actually, Rabbi Pliskin, he says, he doesn't say, but he brings quote that says from the rabbis who say, no, anybody can be pure and clean when he's not around people. The test of Torah is when you're around people who disagree with you. Are you going to act like a jerk or what?
You know,
The test of Torah is when people who disagree with you, who may have different ways. How do you then represent God and live in a nice harmony with everybody like God has to do with us all the time?
I had to speak with one of the tenants that's my son's property, because he's a pot smoker. And he's disabled. You know, he could probably get a card, but he doesn't have one. So I had to talk to him, couldn't do this because it's illegal. So he said, you know, and I said, what it tells me about you is that you think it's okay to break the law. And I said, that concerns me. And he said, no, I don't believe in breaking the law. I just think it's okay to smoke marijuana. So I said, but that's breaking the law. He said, well, you don't agree with all the laws. I said, that's true, but I keep them because I've chosen to live in this country, and those are the laws, so I submit myself to them. And he was like, oh, okay, I get what you're saying.
So this is I'm bringing last week's midrash too. Okay, so those are all ideas of distinction. Some good, some necessary. I'm talking about the world. Some are good, some are necessary because we live in this world, and some are even elitist, meaning there is some distinction made in the world just because you are rich, famous, so you're above the law in a certain way. You're not really, you know. So, but this is the world in which we live. And here we're told the priest, son of Aaron, he's put aside, distinction is made by God because it says he's a leader among his people. So as a leader, we always have to show ourselves when we claim to be leaders, we have to live at a higher standard. You know, in this case, the leader is elected by God. This leader, who is a Levite, son of Aaron, is not elected because he's more spiritual, because he's better. It's just by genetic appartenance. That's it. Because he is son of Aaron, he's drafted. If he doesn't want to do it, that's up to him. But he's got automatic, it's like sons of David have automatic liaison with being king of Jerusalem. Even Messiah. You know, because of genetic. We don't like this genetic separation in our world. You know, but the Torah is very into genetic descendants. So here, this is a principle I want to bring, that this leader, he has to live at a higher standard of purity than everybody else. And this is, I think, we have to find something meaningful for us today in the text. There is no temple, there is no priest, so we can say, oh, this whole thing of Leviticus, you know. No, there is a principle we can learn, that if anybody considers himself to be a congregation leader, either appointed or self-appointed, that's what it means. You have to live at a higher standard. I saw somebody one time explain to me something about leadership that I always keep in mind. It's like, you know a whip for a horse, or like a whip. You know, one thing you learn about a whip is that you just move a little bit. But at the other end, it goes a few inches at the lead, and the other end goes. And as a leader, this is our actions. We make a little move, it creates big wave into those people who have said, I believe in this person, I'm going to listen to them. And they go, that little action has big repercussion, because people will follow what you do and even take it further, in the good and in the bad.
Right.
You know? So a leader has to live by a higher standard. He cannot allow himself a little bit of white lie, because it's about simple. He cannot allow himself a little bit of dishonesty or unseeming words that are bordering on the vulgar. You know, because he's a leader and he's a sample, and whatever sample we portray is taken deeper within the congregation or the people that listen to you. And I think this is a lesson that this is teaching us. Rather than going on all the thing is not supposed to to make bald spot on their head. Well, I'm done with that one. Or my the edges of the beard, or cut gashes in their flesh. A lot of these things are, some of them, I think, they have to do with idolatrous practices.
What are the gashes in the flesh from?
You know, I think they're idolatrous practices that people used to do. Like, you remember when the priests on Mount Carmel, they were praying and everything, they started cutting their flesh.
Well,
You
and the Muslims, the
yeah.
flagell, you know,
Yeah.
ideas to make, you know, make
Yeah.
this stuff, you know, break your skin.
So let's say they used to make the thing in their flesh here.
And I heard that when there was death in their family or whatever, they would pull their beard or they would cut themselves.
Yes. You know, so, and those are things, you know. So, and let's say, for example, in a certain way, if idolatrous people, let's say, used to make a cut here, and that's just, oh, because this idol requires this, you know, okay. Well, if I have it, even though I'm not an idol worshiper, but looks cool, then it will look like,
Right.
you know. And what we're supposed to do is, even Paul, the way he says it, I like how he says it, is avoid even the appearance of evil. We just went through Passover. You know, this is why Jews don't eat lamb at Passover. They eat chicken. You know, they don't eat lamb at Passover because the Passover lamb can only be eaten in Israel. And a Passover lamb is not just any lamb that is eaten at Passover. It's a lamb that has been blessed at the temple. He's gone through the temple thing, and that's the Passover. This is why people came to Jerusalem, because you couldn't eat the Passover. It's in all the laws of Passover in the Torah. You can't eat the Passover lamb in Galilee. You can eat lamb. But then, if you eat lamb in Galilee or in Portland, you know, people would think, oh, they're disobeying Torah, they're eating the Passover lamb somewhere else. And it will be the appearance of disobedience. And if you are a leader, people will say, well, look, he does it, so why don't I? This is the whole reason why it was decided for people not to eat lamb at Passover, to avoid the appearance of evil. And this is like putting fences on the commandment, just like Yeshua did in Matthew 5, 6, and 7. He says, don't commit that. He says, don't even look. You know, don't even think it. You know, to avoid even the appearance of evil, because the people of Yeshua are really leaders in this world. We've got to avoid even the appearance of evil. And evil is as per obedience to Torah, disobedience to Torah. You know, here, just a little resume, because I don't want to read the whole thing. It says, because of his privileged status, the Kohen had to maintain a particularly high standard of purity and perfection. He was forbidden to attend the funeral of anyone but his nearest relatives, for contact with the dead defiled him and prevented him from performing his holy duty. In addition, he could not marry an unchaste or divorced woman. Even more rigid rules applied to the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, who was not even to attend the funeral of his closest relatives, and who could marry only a virgin. Any physical defect disqualified the Kohen from officiating in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle or temple, although he was still entitled to his share of the sacrifices. So the high priest had to live in a real protected place, in a certain way. So this was very important. So, and what we have here is the laws of distinction. You know, a president, he has to be born. I couldn't be president. He has to, but a governor can be born somewhere else. Schwarzenegger, right? Can even have a German accent. It's fine, you know. Okay, then I will go to verses. Then it gives a whole bunch of laws and everything. We'll go all the way down to Leviticus 22, verse 32. He said, where all this, he named all kinds of laws here. I'll even bring it here.
And are we still in the context of speaking to the,
Yes, it's the same speaking. It's,
speaking to the Levites or?
yeah, it's kind of almost the end of the speech. And he said, "Ye shall not profane my holy name. On the contrary, I am to be regarded as holy among the people of Israel. I am Adonai who makes you holy." Holy means set apart, separate. And if you belong to me as one of my leaders, you have to be like me. So, and the only reason why I'm asking you that, because I am who I am that tells you to do it. Who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. So he said, I am holy, I'm the one, I'm holy, and you to be, because I brought you out of the land. This is the idea of separation. I brought you out of the world. Because I want you to be a special people. I want you to show the world how we should live. I want you to come out of this Egyptian nature, Egyptian culture. And I took you out because I want to show you something. I want you to copy me. I want you to be my message. Not by preaching loudly, but by your lifestyle. And that's what he's telling us today too. The job of Levites was Torah teachers. If you remember, they didn't have a place in Israel. They were given a voluntary land offering from a little bit of all the tribes, and they would be there. They would cultivate the land, be given offerings and everything for their work. The way I see the Levite in those days, I don't know. I saw movies about the way it was in the early days in America. You had the parson in the village. The pastor, the parson. He was the only guy really who could read, who was educated. So he was not only the guy who did the service, but he was also the guy who read the mail for people. He did their paperwork. There's this movie, Sergeant York, and you see the parson. He's the one doing the drafting for the army, because he's the only one who can read the paper. So every time somebody gets a letter, they come to him. He's the one who teaches everybody how to use the phone, because he's the one who learned how to use the first phones, drives the first cars. He's teaching everybody about the world around them in the Appalachian Mountains and stuff. That's how I saw the Levite. The Levite had to be educated. He had to read Torah. He had to know the moon and the stars. He was an educated guy. But his education, he was supposed to benefit the people around him. He was supposed to. The way I see the Levite is the guy who teaches people. He doesn't just get donations for doing the service and giving spiritual counsel. He might also be teaching people's children. Teaching people the Torah. He might be helping somebody, a family. The husband is sick, and the husband is sick and can't plow the field. He might go there and help that family. He's the hands-on help for everybody. He's a blessing to the community. And in turn, if he does a good job of being that good representation of God, they will help him. And they'll have a Levite. Some rich people have their own Levite at home as their teacher. So it's like that. A good Levite will be such a blessing that people will want him there and they'll support him. But if he's not a good Levite, all the people are selfish. They won't support him. Then maybe the Levite will go. They won't have a teacher, and they should have taken better care of him. Or maybe he's a jerk and they don't like him, and he's living. You know what I mean? It's like
He ends up driving them away from God instead of
yeah.
bringing them to Him.
So it's a good system, So as such, as teachers, they represent the word of Hashem. Today, if you don't agree with the way of a religious person, you can go and read, whoa, I don't know what he's doing because it says that. But in those days, the only thing you knew about God was from the people who could read. They're the ones who know. So whatever they do must be, he knows. I mean, you couldn't even argue with it. So can you imagine their sense of responsibility? That gives a lot of clout to a priest. He's the only one really who knows the word. A man who is ignorant of the commandment can be forgiven, but a man who knows them and found in rebellion and disobedience, that's different. So people maybe could not read. Most people, literacy is something fairly new, universal literacy. But the priest, he knew the word. So whenever he disobeyed, it had a very bad effect on the people who looked up to him as an example, but also he had no excuse because he knew. So it was definitely rebellion. So these people were responsible to exemplify the Torah in their daily lives. And on top of it, they knew because it was like a trade that was passed on. You know, in Europe, there are still some of these big companies, like wineries, where they make wine, vineyards and everything, that have been passed on from generation to generation to generation. And when a business goes through that, the children they've worked with their parents on the perfection of the trade that their parents had accomplished, and then they've added to it, and then they taught it to their children who've added to it, and we get a certain perfection of the trade through the passing on of generation. Today, children, most of the time, they want to do something, anything but what their parents are doing, you know. If their parents work with wine, they're going to do water. It's like anything, but in those days, it was the natural thing. You take over the family farm, of course. I mean, it's a given. It should still be that way. If you want to do something, that's fine. But in the meantime, have something. In the meantime. So, and it was the same with the Levites. The children of these Levites, they saw their parents, how they were with the community. They saw their parents' mistakes and what they learned from them. They themselves could learn. They probably went with their parents. They listened to their father, teaching others, blah, 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 the whole time. The girls saw their mother and everything. It perfected the trade, and that makes it beautiful. So the Levite was pretty important. So this principle still applies to us as disciples. If we say, I believe in Yeshua and Yeshua is blah, 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 we are responsible to live beyond and above somebody who says nothing. Who says, well, I believe. If somehow we're part of a leadership group by just believing in Yeshua. It's like the Levites are drafted. Maybe you don't want to be a leader. But Levites, they say, well, I'm born son of Aaron. I couldn't help it. I don't want to be a priest. I want to live my life. Well, too bad. And in a certain way, we are also, if we want our reconciliation with God, it comes to discipleship to Yeshua. And more in this world, to be a disciple of Yeshua sets us apart. So we have to say, no, I don't eat this because. No, I don't speak this way because. Yes, I do this because. So we mention his name. So whenever we don't live by the standards we're supposed to, we desecrate his name, which in turns desecrate God's name. So Yeshua actually agreed with the principles in Leviticus that the priest needs to live by a higher standard of purity. Yeshua says to his disciples, who were people who were lay people. They had not been raised in yeshivas. They were lay people. One is a tax collector, one is a zealot, one is a servant, one is a scholar, few of them are fishermen. They're lay folks like you and me. And he tells them, unless your righteousness is far greater than that of the Torah teachers and Prushim, you certainly will not enter the kingdom of God. He's challenging them, being part of his group. He's telling them, you got to have a higher righteousness than even the regular teachers of Israel. That's the same principle. Levites having, and he says, we are here by the promise that Moses told his people, you shall be a nation of priests. Peter talks to the Roman congregation, a congregation of believers, both Jews and Gentiles. I'll use the term mixed congregation, okay? Jews and mixed congregations. He tells them, you are a royal priesthood. Peter understood that. This, and he's telling us that too. We are a royal priesthood. Not only a priesthood, not only sons of the king, but royal priesthood. That gives us such an incentive to have a higher standard in everything we do. Then he says, then he went on to teach. When he said that, unless you have better standard than that of the scribes and Pharisees, that was Matthew 5:20. And then for Matthew 5, 6, and 7, he went on to give examples. You know, he says bad to kill. Oh, no, not just killing, even saying bad about somebody. He says to love, he says to not have hate. He says, oh, no, further. Love your enemy. The big fence, in front of the commandment. Do not commit adultery. No, don't even have a look. Ooh. These are the standards of higher righteousness that belongs to discipleship. Paul gave very good examples of that in 1 Corinthians 9. 1 Corinthians 9 is actually an excellent example of that, and that's not going to be on Macon Mamre. It's going to be on eSword, this one. We're going to take eSword, 1 Corinthians 9. Okay. Where is my cursor? Ah, here it is. 1 Corinthians 9. This is very, very good. Paul had a lot of problems in Corinth because the Corinth were Greek, and again it was a mixed congregation, but they did not always understand this Jewish stuff. They did not always understand this Jewish stuff. So Paul, he challenged the Corinthians to a high level, and at one point they even wanted to diss him. They say, oh, I'm of Peter, I'm of Apollo, and I'm of so-and-so. And then he says, maybe so, but don't forget, I'm your father in the Lord. I'm the one who planted this congregation. So you can't change that. He says, you may say what you want. And in the end, he gives a little bit like Samuel did when when the people kicked him out and said, we want a king. He gave his justification. He says, have I taken anything from anybody? No. So I do not depend on you. I am clean of you. Moses did the same thing with the people. Moses did the same thing. Samuel. Paul does the same thing here. He gives his justification this way. And here's what he says. I'm going to give the background, okay? Paul is a man. He was like the protege of Gamaliel, who was like the big rabbi of the day. He was himself a rabbi. If you notice in every one of his letters, he doesn't introduce himself. Paul, great rabbi of the Messiah. No. Brother in chain, slave, servant. He demoted himself. Now, he didn't demote. He made himself at the same level as everybody. So, and then he expected of himself higher standards. He felt, I understand how he felt. He had done so much wrong to the congregations. In the end, he wanted to do above and beyond the call of duty. And he decided not to marry. He decided to live a very high standard of dedication so he could do as much as possible with the time he had left of his life, after he had that revelations on the road to Damascus. He put himself on a much higher standard. And it's described here in 1 Corinthians 9. He says, am I not a free man? Here he's their planter. He's the one who started that congregation. He calls himself their father in the Lord. He said, am I not a free man? Am I not an emissary of Messiah? Haven't I seen Yeshua, our Lord is giving? Say, look, I'm a free man. I have seen Yeshua. You haven't. That had a lot to do with apostleship. To have seen the Master. It's like, whoa. You know, you're a first-hand witness of the resurrection of the Master. Wow. That gives you lots of clout. So haven't I seen the Lord? And aren't you yourselves the result of my work for the Lord? Look, this congregation started because, you know, even if to others I am not an emissary, at least I am to you. For you are the living proof that I am the Lord's emissary. If I was not an emissary, you would not even exist. I was given the message, and I did it, and here you are. You know, I'm a watchmaker. Here's a watch. This is the proof I'm a watchmaker. You know, it's really simple. This is very good Semitic logic, you know. And then he says, that is my defense when people put me under examination. You see, and then he's going to explain his defense, because they were trying to find fault with him because he kind of told them off about their sexual behavior and some of the stuff they were doing. He told them off, so, you know, whenever you don't get a message, you try to shoot the messenger. So now the messenger's going to talk back, and they didn't know they had a lawyer in Paul. He says, this is my defense when people put me under examination. Don't we have the right to be given food and drink? Or, what that means is, aren't we entitled support? As a teacher, aren't we entitled support? Do you see, okay, do you want me to make it bigger? I can make it bigger, you know.
Bigger would be good.
It doesn't cost more money. Same price, you know. Okay. He said, aren't we entitled support? Says 9:5. Don't we have the right to take along with us a believing wife? Or as do other emissaries, also the Lord's brother and Kepha. James was married. And Peter was married. So don't we have the right to get married? Like Peter, like James? So you're talking about me? What you're trying to doubt me, to put me down because you don't like what I'm saying? Here's my justification. Don't I have the right to claim support from you? Don't I have the right to get married? And in which case I would have less time to offer, because when you're married, hey, you have to take care of your wife too, and the children maybe, you know. Remaining single allows us more time. 9:6. Or are Barnabas and I, the only one required to go on working for our living? He planted congregations while holding a job. That means during the week he worked, and on the weekend he led congregation. When do you rest? You do congregation on Shabbat. Rabbis know that even in the temple had a double duty of offerings on Shabbat. Rabbis know Shabbat is not a day of rest, it's your big day.
They take Mondays off.
They take Mondays or Sunday, you know. That's what's nice actually, when you live in diaspora. You can take Sunday off. You know, but he says, aren't we the only one that work for our own support? He says, so he's bringing his lifestyle as a proof of his apostleship in order to bring weight to his challenge. He had the right to claim support. He could even prove, he's going to prove it by the text actually. He says, did you ever, 9:7, did you ever hear of a soldier paying for his own expenses? Or of a farmer planting a vineyard without eating its grapes? Who shepherds a flock without drinking some of the milk? He says, come on. I have the right to demand from you. What I am saying is not based merely on human authority, but because the Torah says the same thing. I'm not just putting you on a guilt trip about the world or something. The Torah says it. He says, you are not to put the muzzle on an ox when it is treading out the grain. If God is concerned about the cattle all the more does he say this for our sake. It's basically spiritual shepherds are entitled to receive from their congregations. So he could say, the Bible says you're supposed to give me some dough. I mean, some green. You know. So he says, the Bible says, he says, yes, it was written for us, meaning that he who plows and he who threshes should work expecting to get a share of the crop. He's giving that as a proof that it's biblical. I could expect it from you. If we have sown spiritual seed among you, is it too much if we reap a material harvest from you? He said, we've spent our life teaching you. Is it too much if we would even expect food that we've set on our table? If others are sharing in this right to be supported by you, don't we have a greater claim to it? It's like, I'm the guy who actually established you. Come on. But we don't make use of this right. Is living by a higher standard. Rather, we put up with all kinds of things so as not to impede in any way the good news about the Messiah. Then he's going to bring more Torah on the matter. Don't you know, verse 13, that those who work in the temple get their food from the temple? Now he's bringing the Levitical service. You know, it's like the priests who do all this thing for you, they eat. Except if you bring burnt offerings. Of course, this one nobody shares. But the rest, they do. They eat the bread. They're supposed to eat all these big loaves of bread every week. You know, and the meat and all that stuff.
The grain offering.
Grain offering. And they can get donations too and all kinds of stuff.
Storage.
Yeah.
For all that.
Yeah, they had storage and everything. So, don't you know that those who work in the temple get their food from the temple, and those who serve at the altar get a share of the sacrifices offered there? They ate at the expense of the offerers. In the same way, 9:14, the Lord directed that those who proclaim the good news should get their living from the good news. That's what he said. And he made a very good argument. Then he says, but we have not made use of these rights. That's Paul and Barnabas. Nor am I writing now to secure them for myself. I'm not trying to put you on a guilt trip here. For I would rather die than be deprived of my ground for boasting. And I don't think he uses the word boasting as, I want to boast, I'm better than everybody. No, but I am free to tell you the truth, and I am telling you the truth even though it offends you, because I am not financially liable to any of you. So you should believe me that I'm telling you the truth, because if I were liable, I'd make sure to soften my talk in order not to lose my weekly tithe. Basically, this is what it comes to. But I'm liable to nobody. Why can't you believe then that I'm speaking the truth for you? I don't get money for telling you the truth. I don't get money for not telling you the truth. I supply my own self so that I can have that ground of being absolutely truthful to you and not be financially indebted to you. You know, this is a problem very often in churches, actually. The pastors, if they lose members because they're a little bit too strong or they tell too much truth, they're left with a bag. You know, and to get that money to build that big church, they have to have a board. So they cannot go beyond the denominational theological boundaries. If not, they lose everything. So the best way, well, you know, I have kids, you know, and I don't know how to do anything else, so maybe I'll just preach about love today. You know, salvation by grace. Everybody loves that. You know, so 9:16. For I can't boast merely because I proclaim the good news, This I do from inner compulsion. I cannot even be proud of the fact that I preach the good news. I do this by inner compulsion. Woe to me if I don't. It's like the message, it's like Jeremiah. At one point, Jeremiah was so upset at the result of his telling the message. He says, I told the Lord I'm not going to say anything. I'm through with that. I'm going to go and be a hermit. You know. So, but then he says the message burned within me. You know, so same thing here. 17. For if I do this willingly, I have a reward. But if I do it unwillingly, I still do it simply because I've been entrusted with the job. So if I, you know, okay. So this is talking about preaching the gospel, his job. It's kind of, I can't help it. 9:18. So then what is my reward? Just this, that is proclaiming the good news. I can make it available free of charge. He was trying to go on a even higher standard than even the other emissaries by not even being a charge to that congregation. Without making use of the rights to which it entitles me. Free of charge without making use of the right to which it entitles me. And it's difficult, I tell you. Anybody who runs a congregation on the weekend and has a full-time job, it's not easy. Mm-hmm. Your free time goes away. Because, you know, of course, you can download sermons and read something, you know. But very good, somebody who is concerned will not do that. Will pray and ask for, not give stale bread, they will give some fresh stuff, you know, from the kitchen. Was that? And true, you know, instead of just you know, so, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, you know, but it's, what else are we going to do with that time? You know, I read a lot from the rabbis and everything, you know, and when I read about the rabbis and the way they live, for example, Rabbi Rambam, Maimonides, you know, he's this great rabbi, wrote books, and everybody talks about him, quotes Maimonides and everything. I read his schedule one time because I read some books about him, and he was at the court of the king, and he was teaching everything on Shabbat Lilith congregation. On Sunday, he was back to work, and non-stop. You know, early morning, late night, early morning, late night. Because we are his servant, you know. So he says, 9:19, for although I am a free man, not bound to do anyone's bidding, I have made myself a slave to all in order to win as many people as possible. He required himself a higher standard. You know, I owe nothing to no one, he said. I can speak the truth being unhindered by financial loyalties. I have a little something I want to add to. This is from a book called Signs of the Times. It's about the stars. I'm not recommending the book. I haven't read it. So, you know, I'm not saying. So, but there is a part here, actually, it's Christy. I was preparing this, and as I was preparing this, she came to me and said, oh, look what it says, you know. It's something about prophets and prophecy. The Torah clarifies, it's written by Gad Erlanger. It's about the stars and the Torah and stuff. The Torah clarifies the entire issue of prophecy in a special detailed section called Deuteronomy 18:13 through 23. It makes apparent that prophecy is an ongoing path of perfecting the personality. I would emphasize on ongoing. The individual must emulate in his deeds and personal conduct the ways of the Creator, the person who said will be a prophet. The person must emulate in his deeds and personal conduct the ways of the Creator as revealed in the Torah. one who makes a maximal effort to emulate the attributes of the Almighty, the 13 attributes in Exodus 34, I think, may through this process achieve a connection with the divine, known as prophecy. To become a prophet, one had to exhibit. Now, I'm not saying this is the law to be a prophet, but we can see the same spirit of what I'm trying to talk about. To become a prophet, one had to exhibit specific qualifications. All the prophets were exceptional people of the highest moral fiber. Exceptional people of the highest moral fiber. The Talmud cites 3 basic qualifications. It says, prophecy rests only on those who are wise, valiant, and wealthy. This means that God reveals himself only to those who are worthy of such revelation because of their refined character traits. The wise man to which the Talmud refers is one, what does it mean by wise? It means one who has total mastery of the Torah. Everybody wants to be a prophet these days, even though they don't know the Torah. You know, if we don't know Torah, we're not wise. To be wise is to not just know the text of the Torah like you memorized it, but to be able to weigh commandment with commandment. If you're faced with an issue, circumcision, but it's Saturday, to weigh which one. Those are the type of questions that they came to Yeshua when there is a conflict. To weigh the commandments. And the answer might be different at different times. That's what wisdom is. To have a working knowledge of Torah, not just knowledge, working knowledge. The valiant person is one who has totally conquered his evil inclination and lives a truly moral and ethical life. Oh boy. And then it says, the wealthy man is one who is not only materially wealthy, but also rich in his satisfaction with his portion. That means be happy for who you are. Do not try to be somebody else or something else or have a different situation. And the wealthy, okay, I'll read the whole section. Full acquaintance of the wisdom of Torah, this too is a wealth, and it grants the individual a full awareness of the divine knowledge implicit in it, provided one also knows how to actualize it in deeds. High moral stature makes for a worthy person, an individual whose deeds are also worthy. Wealth is an expression of character perfection in that it eliminates, that's the one I was looking for, it eliminates the needless pursuit of money. Having achieved this perfection, it might be said that the individual has done the utmost it says also somewhere that it eliminates that he will be supported. That he will be supported.
Or he will look to
the donations in order to do the work, you know. So this is quite interesting, I found. Okay, so and then I have another one here. This is from the book Love Your Neighbor. The Rambam writes, there are other things that are a profanation of God's name. When a pious Torah scholar does things which cause people to talk against him, even if his acts are not transgressions, he profanes God's names. Even if you do what's right. You know, even if you do what's right. You know, if a Torah scholar does things which cause people to talk against him, even if his acts are not transgression, he profanes God's name. You know, there is last week, there's something I've taken for last week. Last week there's a verse in the parasha that says, you shall surely rebuke your brother and you shall not sin because of him. This verse is usually taken as, oh yeah, I got to rebuke my brother. We like this verse, you know, we like to rebuke
tell him
people.
off.
It gives us a sense of righteousness and control, and you know, we always think that turning off somebody else's candle makes ours shine brighter. It's like, but it says you shall not sin because of it, and basically, usually this is interpreted as to not tell him off would be sinning, or you'd be influenced by him, or blah blah. There's a sin in not telling. But this is not how it's interpreted at all in Judaism. In Judaism, this is seen as you shall surely rebuke your brother, but you shall not do it in a way that is sinful, which would be to shame him in public, to humiliate him in public if he's a leader, or to embarrass. To shame somebody is forbidden in the Torah. In private, but even all the more in public, and even all the more if it's a leader. And also by not so like, for example, sometimes I'm invited to go to a place where there is a rabbi who teaches, and there are some Messianics there. But the rabbi is a rabbi. I'm not a rabbi. A rabbi is somebody who's ordained. I'm not ordained. So a non-ordained rabbi is called a rav. So plus, I would give that person, he has that education. I'm a high school dropout. So I would respect that person just because they are who they are. But if that person says, in a certain sense, he's like the policeman who has the badge, who has everything, but also a guy maybe who knows the laws of police and quite versed. But here's the authority, and my authority, I don't have any. You see what I mean? So basically, if that person who is the rabbi says something that, for example, about Yeshua, that's I consider is off, I would be expected by others that I say, but to me that would be wrong, because I would embarrass. I could maybe run circle around that rabbi. I could prove him wrong. I could. But if I have this discussion, I would have it in private, in a very humble way. Because if I do it right there, I would be shaming him, embarrassing him, creating an issue. And whereas I may be right, I will be sinning because I'll do something wrong to my brother, which is not something God would do. Even by my telling that truth, I will misrepresent by Hashem by my actions. And I think this is so important.
Or be an offense.
And if God wants me to have that conversation with that person, it will have to be at the right time, at the right place, in the right spirit, or maybe not at all. When we have the truth to tell to somebody, we cannot take the chance of telling it in a way that will offend them, because they won't take it. And then it's like, we've missed the boat. They will never know the truth, and it'll be our fault because we're jerks. We have to wait.
Also, Rabbi Foreman gave a really teaching on that, using the Torah. Said that it's really be careful, like the video that goes along with it, because if you're needing to rebuke your brother, but you hold it inside, you also need, the Torah is saying that you need to be careful so that you don't cause yourself to sin because you didn't take care of that problem. And so there's that fine balance.
There's the fine balance.
And that's what I love about the Torah and the whole aspect of really thinking deeply beyond what the right in front of your face, what it literally says, because there's a deeper meaning involved in that. You don't hold it in if you need to speak to your brother, but you need to do it in the right,
That's right.
way, everything that you're saying.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, but don't by not rebuking your brother or not, and it's not to exactly. It's it's not to.
We shouldn't hold it. It's not us that. It shouldn't really have a personal effect because when we consider somebody breaks the law, it's not our law. It's Hashem's law. And if we weighted the idea that, okay, I could tell him the truth, but it's not gonna be right. Wisdom would be to weigh that. No, it's better for me not to. You see?
But it's prayer and it's
Yeah.
seeking the Spirit to help us to also be able to see everything from other vantage points as well. There's a lot more to it than what we think.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
yeah,
not-
yeah.
It's so not black and white. Rebuke your brother.
Yeah. No, it's not black and white.
It's so deeper, and it has, it's like on a circle. There are all the points on a circle.
Yeah.
So-
So here's a bit more from Rambam. I hope this is a. It says, example of this are when such a person buys something and does not pay promptly when he is able to pay, and the seller asks him for payment, or when he does not speak pleasantly to others and does not receive them with a pleasant facial expression, but is quarrelsome and easy to anger. The greater the man, the more careful he must be with his behavior. Such a person should go beyond the letter of the law in his dealing with others. This is what we're talking about. If a Torah scholar will be careful about his behavior, he will speak pleasantly to people, act friendly towards them, receive them with a pleasant facial expression, will refrain from retorting when he is insulted.
No, so much
Will-
me at work every night. Over and over again.
Will honor even those who treat him with disdain. Will be honest in his business dealings, will consistently devote himself to Torah study, will always go beyond the letter of the law, and will avoid extremes and exaggerations. Then he will be praised and beloved, and others will desire to emulate him. This man has sanctified God, and about him it is written, and he said to me, you are my servant of Israel, in whom I shall be glorified. Here's a little bit of an example. Rabbi Eliyahu Duschnitzer once waited with two friends for a bus. The line for the bus was very long, and due to the tumult, Rabbi Duschnitzer didn't receive a ticket after having paid his fare. When he realized that the driver had forgotten to give him a ticket, he said to his traveling companions, I would like to go back to the driver to ask for my ticket, but he might not believe that I have already paid. In that case, my request might cause a chilul Hashem, a desecration of God's name. Because he's a rabbi, he probably can see it, On the other hand, if I do not ask him for the ticket, he might keep the car fare for himself. In that case, he would be guilty of stealing, and I would be at fault also. Therefore, I have decided to pay another fare. Paul did that. In 1 Corinthians 5, he says to people, you, to the congregation, that means congregations, you go to law against each other? What a shame! What a desecration of God's name! It would be better if you were defrauded rather than go to law against each other. In the sight of the Gentiles, the name of God is reproached among the Gentiles because of you, he said. That's what we're talking about. Okay, I'm going to try to finish this up.
From Corinthians?
Yes, Corinthians. Yeah, I think actually I'm done with this. That's what I wanted to give.
So did you want to comment on where it says, to the Jews, I became a Jew, in verse 20? Those under the law, are those, what does it say in the CV?
So yeah, he says, I have made myself a slave to all in order to win as many people as possible. That is, with Jews, what I did was put myself in the position of a Jew in order to win Jews. When people in subjection to a legalistic perversion of the Torah, I put myself in the position of someone under such legalism in order to win those under this legalism, even though myself I'm not. Basically what he's saying, I will make sure to apply, to be concerned about my audience. When he talks about the perverse legalism, there was a form of ultra legalism in those days, And if he's with such an audience, he will respect that, because
What does it mean by legalistic perversion?
basically there was a even Yeshua was dealing with it. They had made up a lot of commandments that were not really commandments and that were not needed. In truth, Judaism makes a difference between what is rabbinical and what is the Torah commandment. And when you weigh the two, it's better to do the Torah commandment. The rabbinical is not obligated. You can find that in the Talmud. But in those days, there was a certain group of people who made their own commandments the law that everybody had to abide by. And that's what he's talking about. And that does not include the whole Talmud in general. That's just a certain, there was a certain group, the Shammaites, the group called Shammai, you know, for the Shammaites. And also some of the Levites, they went in an ultra exaggeration of the laws of purity and everything. Yeshua, he brought a good balance. It's okay to go heal somebody and defile yourself if you're going to help somebody, like in the story of the Good Samaritan.
It might be like our,
You know,
our fundamentalists today.
Fundamentalist.
The English Standard Version, and I'm sure that a lot of the other versions say it's under the law.
Yeah, under the law.
The legalistic perversion of the Torah would be the translation for under the law.
Yeah, I know. And this is why David Stern kind of made
Changed.
careful to
Yeah.
make the difference, because Paul himself followed, you know, he did he said in Acts 23, 24, I always forget, he says, I've never done anything against the traditions of the fathers and against the Torah. So he continued. He did. He took a Nazarite vow. A Nazarite vow. The only benefit of it is to allow you to act as a Levite priest when you're in a place where there is no Levite priest, and you can do the functions of a priest even though you're not one of the sons of Aaron. So he did that. I can understand. He doesn't say why he did. My personal deduction is that he was going everywhere around the Mediterranean Sea, opening congregations, and they had no priests, maybe.
Right.
So he did that. And then, to get rid of that vow, he had to go to Jerusalem. Anybody who takes a vow today is free to do so, but there's no way to break it. Because to break it, you have to go to Jerusalem, to the temple, and make something like $10,000 worth of offering. It's really big. You know, so, and he did that. And he even paid for the vow of 4 other believers when he did, to sub their vow. So he was continuing. And if you read ecclesiastical history from Eusebius, all the disciples, they went into the Daniel diet because they couldn't find suitable meat in diaspora outside of Israel. So they continued. So under the law cannot mean under the Torah, what he says, under a perversive legalism. Yeshua had brought a good balance between the ritual and the interpersonal commandments, the relational commandments and the ritual. He was teaching us to strike a good balance. You know, when sometimes that perverse, legalistic perversion of Torah was putting the ritual at a much higher level and the personal as to the point that he told them, he caught them red-handed. He says, so on the Shabbat you would rescue a sheep that's in the Talmud. You would feed your donkey, you would rescue a sheep from a well, but you would not heal a person. That totally goes against our laws, that if also for a sheep, how much more for a person? That's how we react. Like it says, this is why I say, God's going to feed the birds, how much more is going to feed you? You know what I mean? That's the logic of the Torah. You know, so
Now, he was against the legalistic part of it, because I know.
yeah, he brought a lot of balance, you know, so that relationship with people would be. The way I would apply this is that, for example, if I go to a congregation, to a Jewish synagogue, I will do everything as per I'm being asked. I've heard of Messianics who go to Israel who make a fuss because they're asked to wear a kippah when they go to the wedding world. Say, I'm not under rabbinical authority. I mean, no, but you're in a country that requires it.
But did not the priest wear something on their
Yeah, but
You
he's
read
not a
your
priest.
Bible?
but he's not
Well,
okay.
but you're in a holy place.
Exactly. But you know, this is kind of the thing. You know, so what he says, if I'm in a place requiring to wear a kippah, I wear a kippah. But I went to a church one time, you know, and I kept my hat on because the kippah is just a head covering.
Yeah.
So I had a hat on. I kept my hat on. And I was told, I said, you know, people are not going to be happy if you wear your hat in prayer because it's outside. Oh, okay. Then I would take my hat off, even though as a Jew, it is the tradition, and it's not in the Bible, to cover your head when you pray. But I'm in a place where it's fine. I'm not going to offend. But I thought that was funny because right afterward he says, "But you can wear your kippah." So you know, they did not understand the idea of head covering kippah. But again, they didn't understand. So I said, "It's okay." You see what I mean? It's this is what it means. We have to tell our truth, but we have to be sensitive to our audience, to respect who they are. We cannot want to tell our truth at the cost of offending them, especially culturally or traditionally, because it doesn't matter. Because that also is a sin.
Yeah, if they don't
To offend, to shame, to offend, to embarrass in public. What I'm sorry. What was
if they don't understand.
Yeah. So that's what he's so this is what it is. You know, it's like if you're going to go to if you're a traveler and you go visit a Buddhist temple, or you go to the Taj Mahal in India, which is a tomb, you're going to be asked to take off your shoes. You know, if you go to a Buddhist temple, like I remember we actually were going to minister to children in an orphanage in Thailand. And that orphanage was run by monks. You know, are we going to kill our way? Are we going to offend these people and kill our opportunity to do a mitzvah? This is what Paul, on the other hand, he says, an idol is nothing. You know, and this is what he's dealing with. He's trying to, even in Romans 14, about meats and all that, he's trying to strike a good balance between observing, not offending. The letter to Philemon is a perfect example of that. Letter to Philemon. According to Judaism, if a slave takes refuge in your household, you're supposed to give him to give him refuge. Same thing happened with the Damascus guy to Abraham. You know, if a slave finds sanctuary, and according to Jewish law, you give him freedom. You're supposed to do that. But then, he lived in Rome. Paul was in Rome. When this runaway slave, who was a slave in Greece, named Philemon, he ran away, he escaped, he was an escapee, and while he was in Rome, he met Paul. And Paul witnessed to him. And that Philemon gave his life to Yeshua and was a faithful servant to, I'm sorry, his name was, Philemon is a slave owner. Sorry. Philemon was a slave owner, you know, and the slave's name, I forget what his name is. Yeah. He didn't want to, according to, already Paul was in house arrest. He didn't want to run trouble with the Romans by holding an escapee slave. But yet, according to Jewish law, he had to observe. So he had to run a very, very, very thin. Plus, this guy seemed to have been a very good servant to him. So Paul writes to Philemon, tells the slave, you have to go back. And he sends him back because Roman law says you have to. But he sends him back with a letter, which is the letter to Philemon, to give to his slave owner, because that slave owner was also a Christian. And he tells that slave owner, look, basically what he says He says, I'm sending him back because we have to, but you know about this and that, blah, blah. And this guy is a great service to him, so I'm asking you to give him his freedom. So he obeys the law as a Roman. He obeys the law while using wisdom to also, as much as is within him, to try to obey the law of Torah. And in diaspora, we're not always able to, but we do the best we can. Plus, he needed the help. You know, and this guy, Decimus, is also mentioned somewhere having something. The guy, he became a scribe or something. You know, but he was a very good. And that's what the letter to Philemon is, a plea to Philemon to free that slave. But you see, he had to, in Rome, be like the Romans, while not a Roman. You know, this is the same thing he says. While I'm not myself, he says, with those who live outside the framework of Torah, like in Rome, I put myself in the position of someone outside the Torah in order to win those outside the Torah. Although I myself am not outside the framework of God's Torah, but within the frameworks of the Torah as upheld by the Messiah. 1 Corinthians 9:21. That's the letter to Philemon. You know, so anyway, we can continue this over dinner. Hope this was a blessing.
Very good.
Abba Father, we hear the call to live a higher standard. A higher standard, not necessarily of Levitical purity, because it's a bit non-applicable at this time, but a higher standard of behavior and attitude, of love, of proper representation of what you would be, were you with us, and how Yeshua has shown us that you are. We ask for your continued presence as we go on for dinner. B'Shem Yeshua Mashiach. You know, I'm always reminded of one thing. You know, it's like in the days of Yeshua, there were many very religious people, very religious and very high, very spiritual, very clean. The Levitical people, they stayed away from all the common people. There were a lot of those, but they were not very much liked. In the Talmud, it says somebody who preaches Torah in a wrong spirit is like a carcass in the middle of the road. You usually go away from it. That's a Talmud quote. And these people were like that. People were, because of the pride, the self-righteousness, the arrogance, the elitism, and I'm not saying all, they were all